excited to get
I
in.
miss sushi so much.
It's been a long time coming. The tide is turning. We tired of running. We rising up. It's been a long time coming. They pride is hurting. Shake off that burden and that dirt in. Bounce.
Yes, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Raj Nation Innovations Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast. My name is Rajiv Nathan, aka The Raj Nation. I am your show's host. I'm the founder of Raj Nation Innovation, a hip-hop artist, and a yoga instructor. Above all else, I am a storyteller. I am joined by my co-host, Victoria Cohen, aka VC Money. Victoria is the voice behind the blog Almonds and Asana. She is a yoga instructor, a health, wellness, and fitness enthusiast. Above all else, she's an activist. This is Discover Your Inner Awesome, the only show where you get to eavesdrop on conversations with entrepreneurs, startup founders, artists, and musicians about the stories, the journeys, the struggles, but most importantly, the questions that help creative thinkers like you and I better understand who we are, what we're doing, and how we can do it better. In this episode, we sit down with Cayla Weisberg. Cayla is a venture capitalist and partner at InvestHER Ventures, and we talk about something that's a hot-button issue in the tech community today, and quite honestly, a hot-button issue overall, and that is gender bias. Specifically, we uncover the question, what is unconscious gender bias? Before we dive into that conversation, I want to extend an invitation. If you're not a member already, join our tribe over at www.discoveryourinnerawesome.com. Enter your email address there, and you will never miss another episode of this show. Every single Monday, getting an email in your inbox with the week's episode. All right, let's dive in now to our conversation with Cayla Weisberg of InvestHER Ventures. What is unconscious gender bias? Let's listen in.
So I'm an early stage venture capitalist that is partner at a fund, InvestHER Ventures, and we only invest in the strongest female-led technology companies from coast to coast and everywhere in between. But as far as the topic of unconscious gender bias, it's certainly close to home. So I actually have a riddle that might help explain this disparity. So how do you feel about riddles? Are you a riddle fan?
Let's riddle it up.
All right. So a father and a son are in a horrible car crash that kills the dad. The son is rushed to the hospital, and just as he's about to go under the knife, the surgeon says, "I can't operate. That boy is my son." Explain.
I don't know. I gotta think about this one a little
Well,
longer.
did either of you think that the
I
surgeon
know.
could be the boy's mother?
yes. As soon as you said that, yes, then it ticked into my head.
Yeah, so, I bring up this riddle to mention unconscious gender bias. We all have it on some level or another. And my ask of the ecosystem and the tech community is to just start noticing these schemas. My all-time favorite quality that I've discovered, especially with Chicago investors, is their open mind and inclusive attitude. But it's a hot topic right now, especially on the coast with VCs. And it's so important to cultivate the community, especially the female technology founders in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. So that said, and I like that riddle, and I've heard it before because you told it to me when we got together a month ago, and I've actually asked that to other people since. And what I've found interesting is the depth to which people will answer and not say the mom.
Yeah.
Like I've asked people, and they have said, "Oh, it was his stepdad that was in the car crash, or the stepdad was the surgeon, or
He has two dads.
Yeah, he has two dads. His parents are gay." Or I heard the ghost of his father descended down on the surgeon's table.
Anything.
I've heard the mom had sex with the doctor, and the doctor
was
was
actually
the other.
his dad.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And And that one was really funny. 'Cause it's like, so the mom was brought up, but only in the instance of having an affair and not actually being a doctor in this case. And I've even asked people in the medical field and they've gotten it wrong, which is like, it's not just to say that this is an issue that it's just like, oh, a bunch of people who think one way don't understand everyone else. It's like, we're all facing it to some degree.
Definitely. And I think just noticing it is the first step in the right direction. And removing these biases is truly going to open up the floodgates of opportunity. And there's a lot of talk right now about some of these issues. And I'm so excited to see a lot of action, especially coming from Chicago. So, you know, the reality is there's an enormous gender gap right now in venture capital funding in the US. Female entrepreneurs receive only about 2% of all venture funding, despite owning 38% of the businesses in the country.
Mm-hmm. What do you, so with that stat, and I've become aware of that stat over the last several months. Actually, I think the first time we met is when you mentioned that stat, and I was like, whoa. So the sort of the counter argument to that, or the opposing viewpoint I've heard to that is, well, are enough female founders going out for funding? And is it the fact that they're female, or is it that the ventures aren't the right thing? And I know it's not obviously this or that. It's probably both and all, depending on the situation. But how do we reconcile the fact that it's like, and I'll give you an example. I don't know if you caught that story on LinkedIn recently of that one woman who posted a status just like venting about how she keeps getting rejected by venture capitalists. And then she's like, and it's ridiculous because some 20-year-old with an app will come out and it's just an idea and they'll get funding. I actually ended up getting into a like one-on-one direct message with her. I was like, hey, I'm on your side. Like, I'm curious to know like more about this, etc. And she was saying how basically like it's frustrating. She keeps getting annoyed. She wasn't planning to make a big story out of it or anything. But then like I learned more about her business, and to me it sounded like it's probably just not an investable. Like she did like a lot in revenue, but it just doesn't sound like a business that makes sense for venture capitalists, because it was largely built around like her own personal brand and building a platform around her, like an Oprah-like platform. And of course, Oprah's made more money than anyone. But it's hard for a VC to bet on the next Oprah and be like, that's the thing that's going to give us our money back 10x or whatever that number is. So where's the line in terms of this is happening because I'm a woman or because I'm black or because I'm Indian or gay or whatever that might be, versus I'm not doing the right things, therefore the results aren't happening?
That's such a great question. And, you know, I have to say in the year and a half that I've been a VC, I have validated that this is not a pipeline issue. The deals are there. I have my business partner, Jerry Conweiler, and I together have met with over 425 actively fundraising female tech founders since we began and launched the fund. It is certainly not a pipeline issue. And we are deploying capital. We've formally made 9 investments. Between $50,000 and $250,000 is our check size. So, you know, our goal is to really create the destination in Chicago for female founders all across the U.S. to start having the conversation. And, you know, I think there are certain practical, tactical insights that are big takeaways on the venture side, but also the entrepreneurial side. And, you know, first I'll start from the investor side. VCs must publish the percentage of their funds they invest in women and non-white led startups. I think that's
just
very
being
important.
transparent about it.
Yeah, I think they need to create an organization where women or minority-led entrepreneurs can speak out and have conversations rather than hard-charging pitch interactions. And, there needs to be more female and non-white VCs. And with that, I do think Chicago is taking the lead with diversifying not only the venture ecosystem, but some of the prominent funds are diversifying their portfolio and being transparent with portfolio outcomes. And what we've discovered is the women-led technology companies are scaling faster, exiting quicker. They're proving to have higher valuations. So really, that was the inspiration behind starting our fund, to really cultivate this and really walk the talk as far as putting money to work and really sharing the outcomes. There was an interesting study that was just done by the Harvard Business Review on how VCs frame questions to male entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs. And I don't know if either of you have been in interactions where you've pitched to investors, but traditionally the conversation goes, let's talk about customers, let's talk about sales, your market projections, your strategy and management. And there was a very clear differentiation between how investors interacted with male entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs. So the VCs were framing promotion questions that focus on potential gains to the male entrepreneurs, whereas to the female entrepreneurs, prevention questions. So questions that were
More
preventative, focusing on potential losses. So, for example, when discussing customer outcomes, a promotion question would be like, how are you acquiring customers? Where a prevention question would be, how many daily and monthly active users do you have? So I think it's really important to notice the different questions and for investors to make sure that they're framing questions the same way, and how entrepreneurs can really tackle and overcome smoke screens or potential roadblocks.
Yeah, and go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say it's interesting because I haven't been in that specific situation where I'm pitching to to get investors, but I have had two situations that just always stick out in my mind from when I was interning and when I was interviewing when I graduated college and during college. And so I studied engineering. I worked in supply chain, and during my internship, at the end of the summer, I had my review, and it was great. I ended up working for that company full time, down the road. But all the feedback was really great about my work, whatever, everything great. The one thing was my manager was like, I don't think you need to worry about wearing designer labels or colorful clothes. I think you could pretty much just wear black. People will still notice you. You'll still be good. I was and I was kind of a little embarrassed, a little unsure, but I knew I wasn't dressing inappropriately, but I like to wear earrings and whatever, just be a person who liked my clothes. I don't know. I mean, people say things to Raj about your fun clothes, but I very much down the line looking back on it was I don't think he would have said that to a guy. And then the other thing was I was interviewing in between when I finished that internship and when I ended up taking the job there with another really large company, and I did end up getting a job offer from them. But during one of the interviews, the guy actually said to me, "This is a man's world, and it is not a sorority." And he kind of was like, how are you going to handle that? And I was like, well, I study engineering and it's pretty much all guys, so I'm pretty used to it.
Yeah.
Not really that big of a deal. But again, I mean, he wouldn't have said that to me. It was so bizarre. And I ended up not taking their offer because I was like, that guy totally turned me off to wanting to work there.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard a lot with all of the deals that I've seen in the past year and a half. A chunk of those were certainly not B2B enterprise software in slow-moving archaic industries. Some were, some weren't. A lot of them were consumer focused, especially product services or technology enabled solutions for women. So I think it's difficult when you're a woman and you're trying to fundraise for your product or service that so happens to be a woman. Let's say you have a tampon company and you're pitching a white VC that is male. Is he going to do diligence on the tampon space? Just like, I may not be an expert in automotive engineering,
Right.
but if there was a female founder that pitched me, would I give her the same opportunity as I would a tampon company, because I know the tampon space.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think there is major responsibility on funds investment philosophies, and investors have their own investment theses, so they may only invest in consumer tech or enterprise tech. So entrepreneurs need to know who to speak to and make sure they're not talking to the wrong investors that may not invest in that product or service. But women and men need to know, and especially investors need to be really open to learning about new spaces that they may not necessarily be experts in.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
I think so. That point that you just made, and there is a line of, well, we just only invest in these kinds of companies, or, you'll see a lot of times on Shark Tank, Mark Cuban will be like, I don't know anything about that. Like, that's really not my industry. It's not my forte, so I'm out. And that, that's okay, right?
Of course.
To not, and I say that more in the sense of, like, use the tampon example. Is it okay for a man to be like, I know nothing about this, and I'm not going to really be.
Well, there's a difference of saying I know nothing about it. Like if they were already, in the CPG industry or something, or other sort of something that's like related to it, to say, oh, I don't know about that specifically, than if they were totally geared towards automotive and someone came in for tampons.
Sure.
I think that's what your point is, right?
Yeah. There's plenty of funds that are industry agnostic. InvestHER, for example, is industry agnostic. We don't specialize in healthcare, so you won't see any healthcare-oriented companies within our portfolio. But if there is a tech component with a really small, with a really large market size and a really strong female founder with a revenue generated mindset, I think we will consider the deal, and we will do our best to seek out experts in the area. Now, my business partner and I are running a micro fund, so the two of us aren't experts in everything. Frankly, we're experts in sales and business development, but we do have a Rolodex, so we're going to do everything in our power to solicit feedback from people within our network to see where we can add value, but most importantly, how we can make introductions and help that entrepreneur find the right capital outlet.
Yeah. So that kind of goes into the point that, whether it's the capital raise or even other scenarios, and you mentioned at the beginning the idea of how like there's more bias on the coasts, it appears, than in the Midwest. Knowing the right pond to be fishing in can greatly accelerate your own mission and your goals and things like that. Like I remember Gary Vaynerchuk, who I'm not like a huge fan of, but I like some of his videos. He had some video and he was like, you want to start a pot startup in Texas? Like because someone had written in about like how he's running and all this. It's like, why the fuck would you move to Colorado if you want to start a pot startup? Like Texas isn't going to change their law forever. Yeah. It's the most conservative state in the country. Yeah. So don't complain. Like move yourself to where you need to be.
Businesses.
Yeah. We talked about some best practices, things to do, but we can also talk about what not to do. And the reality is, you don't want to forget about your business, and you don't want to waste your time talking to the wrong investors. You don't want to fundraise just because you think everyone around you is fundraising. You don't want to forget about your numbers. You don't want to forget about your industry. Don't start with the risks. Start with the opportunity, and don't forget at the end of the day what your outcome is and what it's all about. And I think it's so important to remember when you're an entrepreneur, if you don't execute, you die. Your business dies. And while I had mentioned, I think there's major opportunity in Chicago and in the greater Midwest, I have to say there needs to be more exits in the Midwest, and especially with female-led technology companies. So I think there's going to be there's major pressure, and my call to action to my community of women-led companies is we need to scale, we need to be transparent, we need to band together, but most importantly, we need exits. And that's really when I think the greater community is going to really take note and start proactively diversifying their portfolios when we have more strong outcomes, especially in Chicago, led by women.
Yeah, a couple other things that sort of came to mind too, when like with that riddle that you said at the beginning, and I've kind of been like playing it through my head. So the first thing is that both of my parents are entrepreneurs. They have been my entire life, but I always talk about like the stuff my dad has worked on and stuff that my dad has done, and because I feel like he talks about it a lot, you know, and he puts it out there and like, I'm an entrepreneur, whatever, like that's just kind of how it is. Whereas I feel like my mom has been an equally successful entrepreneur doing totally different things. And I think I often forget that, because not that she downplays it, but kind of. And it's just, it's a funny thing that like they both always have been their own bosses. They've both been successful in some things and not in other, you know, and they've both had these like very long careers. They will be entrepreneurs till the day they die. Like they'll never stop. But like my dad's the one I think of, whereas like my mom is too. So that's kind of a funny thing. And then the other thing is, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on here before, but so I worked for Pepsi, and when I interned with them, we had the opportunity to sit down with a bunch of, we had lunch and learns with a ton of the leadership, including our CEO, Indra Nui. And when we spoke with her, a big piece of what she talked about in terms of her career, she has 2 kids, she was like, you know, work has always come first. If I had to have an assistant go to my kid's recital, I did it. And, you know, basically my family came second, and that's kind of like the storyline she had to put out there and she had to live by and she had to tell. We had lunch like a week or two, you know, before or after that with the guy who was at the time like running Frito-Lay, and he was the complete opposite. He was like, my kids always come first. If I have to miss an important meeting for my kid's kindergarten graduation, I'll do it. And that's always stuck with me as like such an interesting dichotomy that the woman has to say work comes first, because if she doesn't, people kind of judge that and they're like, oh, well, she's not really, she's not here, she's like focused on home. And if the guy doesn't say that, then he kind of sounds like a jerk, that like, oh, he's spending time with his family. And so it's just interesting, like whether or not it's true or it's true for everyone, I don't know, but it was just 2 very different stories that these very successful people had to kind of put out there, because that's what they had to show, you know?
Absolutely. I think women often underestimate their value. I see it all the time in my speaking engagements and my teaching engagements with my portfolio companies. And that's why it's our responsibility to quantify these issues. And I have to say, women are the pace setters. There are 9 million privately held American companies led by women, which is major. 7.8 million people are employed, responsible for these companies, and they're generating almost $1.4 trillion in gross sales revenue. Wow. So you look at the numbers, and and the proof is in the pudding. Women are actually taking the lead. This is not a second-class community, and as I mentioned, the fact that there are almost 40% of new entrepreneurs in the U.S. that are women. This is the highest percentage since 1996. So celebrating the victories are huge, but also, we don't have much to celebrate right now as far as exits in Chicago. So I think, with that, there is that call to action that I had mentioned, but also really understanding what is going on from a granular level and from a behavioral level. I think I notice with women is the sense of urgency, as far as tenacity with reaching out and asking for help. I only look at women-led companies, but in talking to my co-investors, I think women have a harder time following up And
they think they're being annoying.
They think they're being annoying when we spend a lot of our time, and really ingrained within my fund's DNA, is creating a sense of urgency and really controlling your destiny as far as outcome. So proactively asking for a meeting with potential investors instead of connecting with them, maybe saying an email, it's great to meet you, let's keep in touch. Well, what do I say? How do I keep in touch? So we offer best practices. I think one thing for women to recognize is when they hear no to what? What I always say is, it's not a no, it's a not right now or a maybe. So hear no 3 times and consider it a no. But the first time and the second time, consider it a not right now or a maybe. And ask for referrals. I think that's so important. If you meet with an investor and you're an entrepreneur actively fundraising, is that meeting a quick coffee, or is that a meeting where your goal and expected outcome is a pitch with the partners? If it's not a great fit for their fund, are you asking that investor who may be a great fit to talk to? Are you asking for help? Are you asking for introductions? And I think going that extra mile is harder for women to ask for help, and to also hear no and really reframe that to take control of your destiny.
Let's pause for a hot minute for this quick PSA. Are you part of the startup community? If so, keep listening. If not, go ahead and hit the skip ahead button, because this is not going to apply to you. The Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast is a property of Raj Nation Innovation. What is Raj Nation Innovation? Well, it's simple. I talk to founders and startup teams every day who flat out tell me, hey, we suck at telling our story. I help remove the suck, combining a unique background of both branding expertise as well as songwriting expertise from my experience as a hip-hop artist. I take a performance lens and mindset to the world of business communication. Using this approach, I partner with growth-focused startups to help them develop their story, their go-to-market message, and their pitch so they can raise venture capital and acquire their early customers. Think of me like the Will Smith character Hitch, but for startups. And yes, I will tell you when you're dancing like an idiot. Does this sound like a conversation we should have? If so, head to www.rajnationinnovation.com. That's rajnationinnovation.com. Send me a message through there, and let's chat. Back now to the podcast.
So that brings me to, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the wage gap.
Yeah.
And based on the stuff you just said, I think at face value, you could say, okay, what is it, like 70 cents on the dollar is what women make compared to men? The thought I've always had to that is, well, and I think this has been tied into that, is like women, not all, but the general idea is that women are less likely to ask for more money, therefore get paid less. So if I'm an employer, and I'm looking at this more in the sense of like if someone's willing to not work for less, should I really go out of my way to pay them more?
Yeah.
If they haven't negotiated with me, whereas say a man is more used to being aggressive and being like, no, this is what my value is, etc. And Cayla, you mentioned before, there's a lot of women who underestimate their values. So if a man's more hard charging about their value, it's like, well, crap, this talent is really good.
Yeah.
We're gonna lose him if we don't pay him, that much. Versus the woman in that same scenario who's like, hey, I'd like to make this much. Sorry, we can't do that. Okay. Now, we can say, okay, 70 cents on the dollar, but is it just as black and white as women make less, men make more, or is there more psychology thrown into it where we need to put more education into women to be stand up for yourself in these environments and ask for more and take more ownership over the fact that you can make more?
I think this is a fundamental issue that, placing the blame on women for not maybe being masters in the art of negotiation. The fundamental issue here is the wage discrepancy. And I think, the ownership needs to be on the employer versus the employee, regardless of what the employee looks like. There should be zero tolerance for any type of discrimination, especially in that capacity, and that's just my opinion. But with that being said, there are professional challenges that women globally experience. And I think this has to do with mentors and role models that look like the individual, that help train and help provide sufficient opportunity through introductions and through balancing professional and personal lives. I think there are several challenges that women face when it comes to skills and opportunity and balance. So having role models and superiors that have gone through those challenges to help provide a hand and guidance as that woman continues to advance throughout her career is really important. But again, it's our responsibility to really change the ecosystem. So with that, I encourage every woman to build their own personal board of directors. So it's your responsibility personally to find experts across industries that help make you better, that have a proven track record, and help guide you and mentor you along the way, that don't work for your company, that again are experts in tech, experts in negotiation, experts in home balance, experts in money management. I think the only way is to get diverse feedback from people around you, but again, you have to seek it out.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, there's so many I don't want to say obstacles, but the system is set up in a way that currently isn't conducive to women being in certain types of roles that men are in with like the same expectations. So like you hear about other countries, I was reading recently maybe in the Netherlands that like have a lot of companies that are doing, like women working corporate jobs, but they're like part-time corporate jobs or they're job share type things, because it's not, we're never going to change the fact that a woman carries a baby and she's going to need to recover from that, and then she's going to need to breastfeed. Like there's certain physical things that like a woman and a man who want to have a family or whatever, like that a woman's going to physically just have to do, that are going to make it harder for her to do that job for a certain amount of time, maybe forever, whatever. But I think that we, in this country, I don't think we're doing a very good job of making jobs approachable for women who have children or who are starting families or have families, and making it so that like they can come to work, but they can also have the flexibility to leave when they need to take the time off when they need to, or even giving that same opportunity to men that are husbands and saying, here's paternity leave, all of those
Google
sort of
does a good
things.
job of that.
Yeah, no. There are certainly companies that
But
are.
everyone else, I think, could get up to their standard.
There are certainly companies that are, and I think if it's only going to get better, hopefully moving forward. But I do think that that's something that's really tough.
So to that point, and to go back to when you mentioned the woman at Pepsi who was like, family comes second. How did you emotionally receive that? Because I know I have heard a couple women say that before, and I've had to check myself and be like, oh, that's weird. Wait, no, that shouldn't be weird. Because if a man said that same thing, I wouldn't care. I'd be like, that's fine. He's a father. But when I hear a mother say that, I have to check myself and be like, oh.
I think for everyone, there's probably different phases of your life when different things are priorities. Sometimes work is number one, sometimes family's number one, whatever. It probably changes all the time if you've got something fluid. I don't remember what I felt in that exact moment. It's more something that I've looked back on over time, and just juxtaposing those two of him saying one and her saying the other. It's always just been a gosh, that felt like they had to say those things because they knew how the room was reading them or how they would be taking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and how you're read and that kind of stuff. You mentioned that performance review where they were like, you shouldn't wear these colors. I always, when I thought
Or
it was
I
really
should just
funny-
wear black, which is ironic because now I'm a yoga teacher and I do wear black. So
Do you remember though during the election last year, the day Elizabeth Warren endorsed Hillary Clinton, and they were on that like podium platform,
don't
and they
even
both
get me
wore like
started.
the same blue dress pretty much. And people were like, people made all these comments about how they're wearing the same outfit. Yet no one has ever talked about how every man wears the exact same suit. They just happen to maybe change their tie.
Yeah.
I mean, or just going. Yeah, I'm just going out here and saying, if Hillary had 3 kids by 3 different men, there is
Oh,
no
no,
way,
that's-
no way that would have just slipped
Yeah,
under the
right.
radar.
Exactly.
If she had 3
Yeah.
baby daddies,
Yeah.
no way would she gotten away with that. And like, no one cares that he has 3 baby mamas. So you know, seriously.
Yeah, I think there's so much more awareness now, more than ever, on unconscious gender bias, and we hear it every day, especially with politics. But it's definitely bleeding into corporate America. It's bleeding into financial services, and we are noticing it. We're talking about it, and action needs to be made. But again, I think the conversation needs to happen for action to happen. And I so appreciate and admire all of the courageous women that are speaking out about, these things that are happening that are completely inappropriate and unethical and unprofessional. That's really limiting the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think too, it's not just that the conversation is happening, it's that on a micro level, individuals, we all need to just take that extra half second and be like, what lens am I looking at this through, right? Like even, like I know I've had times before where I have either observed, and I feel like I'm much better at it now than when I was a little bit younger, but you'll see like a powerful woman, maybe you have an interaction with a powerful woman, and your first thought might be like, oh, she's kind of bossy, or the extreme would be like,
She's
oh,
a bitch.
she's a bitch. Right?
Yes, there's a lot of that.
But only because it's like, but if that was a man, would you have that same reaction where you say, oh, he's a strong leader?
He's a boss.
Right, he's a boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are the little things. Like, man, again, like I'm much better at it now than I used to be. And but I've observed people still who are like, yeah, I don't know, she's just kind of like bossy or whatever they'll say, whatever word they want to use, and then I'll have to be like, okay, but do you know any men who are exactly like that? And then they're like, oh, I guess so. So it's just those little, and it's almost like taking it upon yourself, not only to check yourself, but if you see someone else, like throw an opposing viewpoint in their ways to make them think about it.
Well, yeah, you go on.
Yeah, I think especially in the startup world. I'm an investor, and the beauty of what I do is I literally bank on people's dreams, right? I mean, think about it. I literally bank on people's dreams. The nature of VC is telling the future, and I am not a fortune teller. So what do I have to look at? I look at the fundamental pieces of the business. I look at potential customers. I look at acquisition strategy. I look at the market size. I look at the price of the deal. I look at, the team dynamic and how the key players work with one another. I have conversations with prospective customers, and I do everything I can to help. But we need to think about what we're banking on. Are we banking on the personality and maybe the vibe that we get with the entrepreneur because we have a lot of similarities? Or are we banking on the opportunity? And the reality is big, impressive outcomes come with big, impressive customer experiences, and big impressive numbers thereafter come to fruition. So we have to look at the technology potential, and I think there's so much noise of creating disruptive technology, and there's a lot of distracting things. I think this gender issue can create a lot of noise, when at the end of the day, as an investor, you have to look at what matters most. Does the product work? Do customers love it? And I think we all need to keep in mind what that end goal is, and also be really conscious of the types of questions that we're asking. So, I mentioned, questions on customers, but, sales is so crucial, and many entrepreneurs are pre-product, pre-revenue. So, as an investor, you're going to think, how are you going to plan to monetize, right? And, as an investor, instead of asking, how long will it take you to break even, ask about, how you think your target market is growing and what major milestones you're targeting to hit this year, instead of detractor questions like future cash flows and how predictable they might be, or, how you're planning to test it. Think about the opportunity and really the vision, the impact, the mission, and most importantly, what the forecasted goals are.
Yeah. Good.
No, I do think it's interesting, Raj, getting back to your point of like when you were sort of asking the question, like, is there part of it being that women need to be, whether you want to call it educated, or there needs to be a shift in like the female mindset too, right? Like of either saying that like we can be more confident, we can ask for more, or, whatever it is. I think that's a big part of it, because like, okay, so for example, I was recently with a friend of mine who she works for a big bank, and she's a go-getter. She's like moved her way up, and she supports herself, and she doesn't have a boyfriend. She's like whatever. She's a working gal. Yeah, exactly. And she was telling me how she had been recently asked, like so many big companies, it's like you also have to do like extracurricular things, right? You have to be like on all these like whatever committees and stuff. And she was like, they recently asked me to give a talk to this like women's group or whatever in her company. So she did. And then all these girls were coming up to her and they were like, hey, like, would love to get coffee. Like, you inspire me, and like, go women, whatever. And she said to me, and I'm like totally a feminist. So I thought this was like a little bit funny, but whatever, has her own views. She was like, but me, I'm like not, this is what she was saying. She was like, I'm not a feminist. I don't believe in like, all that women stuff. Like I got myself here, that whole thing. And I was just like, it was at like midnight, and the night was about to end. And I was like, I'm not even going there. Like, doesn't even matter, whatever. And I think the part that like breaks my heart about that is that I think sometimes, and men are a part of it too, like they've got to be educated in the same way, but I think sometimes like we hurt ourselves and we hurt each other by like making those judgments, or trying to be too strong, but not acknowledging that it does exist. It's a real thing. It exists. Gender bias exists. Like, let's just like, that's just got to be accepted, and saying like, oh, well, I got here and whatever, but you know how many other women paved the way for you to get there, to even be able to wear pants to work? I mean, seriously though. Yeah. Like, I mean, do you know how many women came before you to fight that fight? Absolutely. So that you can have a job, you can own your own car, you can own your own apartment, you are your own legal entity, you don't belong to someone else. And so I think it's just even starting like probably so small, and just acknowledging the fact that it does exist, it's a reality, and we all need to be educated on it, but like especially women, so that we don't have women out there that are like, no, not a real thing. Like, I don't believe in feminism. Like, that doesn't help. I
think that's such a great point. It is to think about how we got here. And Jerry and I wanted to really lead by example to begin changing the face of what venture capital looks like. But the ultimate goal isn't to, as women, stand in these silos and operate in these silos. No way. Like, the amount of speaking engagements I do, panels that I do where, it's with a female audience talking about female issues with an all-female panel, that's not going to change anything. Again, it starts the conversation. Yeah. And it creates a destination so that women can advocate for one another and learn how to stick up for themselves and learn how to really conquer barriers and overcome smoke screens. But more men need to be involved in these conversations, and more men need to speak out about unconscious gender bias. Right. We're talking about this, and I'm a female that runs a female-focused venture capital fund. It would be incredible for men to begin taking the charge, which they really are, and I'm thrilled to see some funds really standing up that are run by men that are saying, look, we don't have any female-led tech companies within our portfolio. Send me the deal flow.
That's cool.
So it's great, like I'm seeing so much calibration, especially in Chicago. There are incredible funds like Math Venture Partners, with Dana Wright as an equal partner, and Samara Meja Hernandez, who is also there really championing these issues. The Pritzker Group has women partners and VPs. So it's incredible to see these larger prominent funds in Chicago really championing this, and it's not just the women there that are championing this. It's the male partners that are standing up next to the women to really discuss this. But we need to see more men at these events that are female focused, talking about these issues, and more men leading by really writing checks and helping companies scale that aren't necessarily led by people that look like or act like them.
Yeah, I've talked with guys who are like, and having these like political, I'm very political, so I often have like political conversations with people, and guys who are like, yeah, sure, like I'm a feminist too, like what can I do, like what should I be doing about it? And it's like, anything, do anything, just tell people you're a feminist. I don't know, but I mean, there is so much that guys can do to like stand alongside women and not just act like, oh well, you'll figure it out.
Well, and I think part of it comes in finding the right forums and platforms for yourself, either to create for yourself or to go to. I mean, I'll tell you, I can't tell you the number of times people have told me with this specific show, they'll be like, I could never have that conversation. And I'm like, you know what? This show is about having that conversation, whether I necessarily feel totally comfortable about it or not.
Right.
But it's not about my comfort. The whole point is like, let's step into our discomfort and actually learn and grow.
Yeah.
And it's understanding that to have this discourse, this dialogue, like you mentioned, Cayla, it's got to be talking on both sides, right? Because if it's just women talking about it, you've got women with their backs turned shouting in the opposite direction that the men are facing, which is why it's like men need to turn around and look, women need to turn around and look and talk to each other, and that's where it's like figure out if there isn't a platform you can go to, create one for yourself.
Yeah.
If it's an issue you care about, or just start to incorporate it into your practices already.
Absolutely. And, especially in the tech community, you look at 1871, and I'm so thrilled to say that we have a program partnership with Wisdom, which is a cohort just for female tech founders. And,
to elaborate, the acronym stands for
Women in STEM.
Yeah.
And the last demo day for the last cohort, I was so impressed. Howard Tolman, who I completely admire, came up in front of the audience and talked about these gender issues and why it's so important to have the Wisdom program. And it's so important to really create a destination and a working place that provides resources and non-threatening feedback like 1871, and you walk around and there's a lactation room there, and they talk about it. And I think someone like that to step up, who's really leading the charge, creating this destination, is going to create a far more inclusive ecosystem.
Yeah. What well, that's actually a good segue now into, let's talk a little bit more about InvestHER specifically, which we've been touching on up to this point. But for our listeners, it's a venture capital fund. You've talked about it, how it's focused on women-led startups, but I know it's beyond that. So let our listeners know why InvestHER is more than just investing in women-led startups.
We're definitely not just a check in on a round. We do our best to be able to be the point person and be the advocate, especially in a sales and business development, strategic and tactical lens. So we evaluate deals differently because it's all with a revenue mindset. So we look at where a company is from a three-prong approach. We look at where the company is before they generate revenue, where they are when they begin the sales process, and then how they're continuing to cultivate relationships with their customers, whether it's on an enterprise level in an account management capacity or a lifetime value individual B2C model. So as I had mentioned, we're industry agnostic, we're geographically unlimited. We've invested in companies that are raising seed rounds and Series A rounds, but just breaking into VC, only being a year and a half old at this point, we are recognizing how different rounds can be structured geographically. So we are so proud to say that we have 7 companies in our portfolio that are based here in Chicago. And we're definitely looking to continue to write checks in companies outside of Chicago. But again, everything at the end of the day is around your customer acquisition strategy. And we like to add value where we can. And we certainly know what we don't know. So if we don't know how to solve a problem or we can't roll up our sleeves and help, we do our best to make introductions and also down the line help diversify board dynamics. So it's not just about the first check-in. Down the line, when you have a board of directors, who's sitting on the board? Are they men? Are they women? And what do they represent? Do you have independent investors? Are all of your board members independent board members? So what can we do to make the introductions and to really help move the needle from an activation standpoint to really create scalability?
Nice. My follow-up question to that is, so knowing that you invest only in women-owned startups, or at least partially women-owned startups, how do you, you don't want to obviously run into the situation of someone being like, wait, you invest in women-led startups, why are you turning me down? What the heck, you're supposed to be for women. Because looking at the numbers game, you have to pass on more companies than you say yes to, right? Just because if you said yes to everyone, then you wouldn't have a fund.
Right.
So what's your message to that person who's like, well, wait, they're investing in women, then it's an automatic yes.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we do have a thesis, and the thesis, again, focuses on sales and revenue generation and really where we can add the most value. Also, if the round makes sense for us, where we can come in, if there's a lead investor secured, so we're not at the point where we draft term sheets. So there has to be an investor that actually drafts the term sheet and will partner with that fund so that we can go in on the deal and close out the round. Now, that may mean we'll help make introductions to some of our co-investors that might really add value. But just to clarify, the companies that we invest in aren't all run by women. There needs to be at least one woman on the executive team with equity interests. So some of the most successful companies have diverse executive teams. So the woman may be the co-founder, but she may be the CTO or the CMO or the COO, not necessarily the CEO. But we focus on the companies with that diverse executive team. And again, when I say diverse, it's not just gender diversity. I think it's important to find the yin to your yang from a co-founder dynamic, whether, I'm a woman and I do have a business partner who's a woman, Jerry, and she and I are very different, but we complement one another, and we're able to really recognize what we know and what we don't know. And so, the companies that we look for have a really strong dynamic within the executive team. To use the analogy of Thanksgiving, if everyone came to Thanksgiving dinner tasked with bringing the turkey, you'll have a whole lot of turkey. You bring the turkey, you bring the stuffing, you bring the potatoes, and you have a great Thanksgiving dinner. So you have to really pull in the forces and find people with complementary skill sets to help that end outcome.
man or woman, what advice do you have to founders going into their capital raises?
There is no prescriptive, guaranteed way to be successful. You are your first investor, and I think it's so important to control your destiny, but recognize that success may look like bootstrapping along the way, but it also may look like finding the right strategic partners that may or may not be investors. So, and also the technology isn't necessarily going to be the one-trick pony. There's something really special about talent, service, and process that can create an outcome that's remarkable.
Awesome. All right, where can our listeners learn more about InvestHER, and if they want to get in touch with you?
InvestHERventures.com. So InvestHER Ventures.com. You can find me on Twitter at Cayla Weisberg. You can email me at Cayla, Cayla, at InvestHERventures.com.
Awesome. So let's wrap it up then. We'll close by giving our answer to today's question. We'll go one by one. We'll start with Victoria and close with Cayla. Let's do this. So the question was, what is unconscious gender bias? Let's answer what is unconscious gender bias, but also on top of that, let's add in how do we confront or address the bias?
Okay, I think that unconscious gender bias is basically answering the same question differently depending on if it's a man or a woman. And maybe it's a little question, big question. I think that's just kind of how you can boil it down. Like, would I answer this the same way for him versus her, right? So that's kind of how I see gender bias. In terms of how I think you can confront it, one, acknowledging that it exists and just like accepting that. And then two, I think in each situation where you find yourself answering a critical or maybe not even a critical question differently, if it's a man or a woman, checking yourself, kind of like you mentioned, Raj, and saying, well, wait a minute, on the flip side, if I was having the same discussion about a guy, would I be saying the same thing, or vice versa about a woman? So I think it's just becoming really conscious about how we answer those questions differently depending on someone's gender.
My answer, what is unconscious gender bias? I think it is any inherent notion that you have what you have or don't have what you don't have because of your physiological status. And basically not knowing that that's the reason why you may have an advantage over another person or have a disadvantage from another person. I think a way to confront it, I'll take a different approach to this, and it's one of the things I do with some of the startups that I work with who are women-led. Whether I say it outright or I just weave it in based on my way of working with them and my line of questioning, is I will basically try and put them in a lens of if they, so for instance, let's say we're working through the FAQ, and they're like, well, we can't really say that, that's bragging too much. And I'm like, and it's not lying, I'm not trying to tell them to lie, but I'll be like, either I'll outright say it or I'll weave it in, but I'm basically trying to get to the point of, do you think a man would say the same thing in this scenario? Because I want you to get to the point, I want you to get up to that point where you're not accidentally holding yourself back and you're putting your best foot forward here. And I don't say that to be oh, men are amazing. It's more I say that to be there are these little things we talked about before, underestimating the value, that kind of stuff. And let's be aware of that so we can actually represent this company in the best way possible, so that the best outcomes can happen.
Awesome. Unconscious gender bias to me is blind judgment. It's literally covering your eyes and not watching your feet when you're interacting with someone that doesn't look like you. And the best way to overcome it is, especially if you're a woman in the tech community, is to create your own destiny by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, stretching yourself every single day. Now, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations with men that are known to maybe have unconscious gender bias. But when I say putting yourself in uncomfortable situations is, asking why not. asking for introductions, really stretching yourself from an access standpoint. So getting access to capital and access to resources are two hard things for women entrepreneurs. So with that, expanding your own personal Rolodex by building your own personal board of directors of people that have done it before, and stretching yourself by creating goals every single day and trying to conquer those goals by daily affirmations and also touch points with your personal board of directors.
Yeah. And I would even add to that, you said ask why not. I would say on the man side of things, what we need to ask is why, in the sense of like, why am I thinking this way? Why am I talking like this, acting like this, etc.? And then we get more of that conversation happening. Cayla Weisberg, this was fun. I'm glad we got through this without any scars.
Yeah, this was awesome.
That wrapped up our conversation with Cayla Weisberg. Cayla, thank you so much for joining us and unpacking that topic with us. I learned a lot. I'm glad we could all share our perspectives and learn from each other. I think the larger community can learn a lot from this conversation as well. Speaking of the larger community, did you, the listener, enjoy this episode? If so, the best compliment you can give us is a rating and review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews help more people find the show, therefore more people get to discover their inner awesome. While you're leaving that review, go ahead and subscribe to the show on whatever platform it is you listen to, whether that is iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, or the various other podcasting platforms in which you can find this show. For full show notes, references, and resources, as well as Cayla's contact information, grab it all at our website, www.discoveryourinnerawesome.com. While you're there, be sure to page through our almost 100 episode archive. That's right, we are closing in on 100 episodes of the show. I can't believe it. That'll tie a bow on this one. Thank you again to Cayla Weisberg for joining us. For Victoria Cohen, I am Raj Nation. You have been listening to the Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast. We will see you next time, but in the meantime, take care and be awesome today.